Hello and welcome everyone to our CAA panel titled A Vision for Change, a New Media Architecture Uniting the Arts and Sciences, sponsored by Leonardo, Education and Art Forum, LEAF, Erica Hruby, Leonardo, Isaiah's Editorial Director, and I, Gustavo Rincon, will be moderating the panel. Let me say a few words about myself. I am educated as an architect, and I'm a recent PhD graduate from the University of California, Santa Barbara. The topic of my dissertation is titled Shaping Space as Information, a conceptual framework for new media architectures. A core area of my research and my grounding for the creation of a new field of inquiry was the integration of architectural methods and research demonstrated in prototypes for the arts and sciences. In today's panel, I'm honored to facilitate a dialogue between artist practitioners, research scholars, and a visionary of the field in media arts and music composition. Let me explain the structure of the panel before moving forward. I will be introducing the panel, and then Erica will briefly introduce her work with Leonardo and the mission of LEAF. We will then go to each of our individual panelists for 15-minute presentations, and then we will proceed to our discussion section with some questions that will frame our understanding of the fields that create a view of the arts and sciences. My questions are as follows. What are the motivations and problems for a paradigm shift of research for the arts and sciences? How did we arrive here at this moment as research practitioners and scholars? And why is the art and science research essential for our future as a human species? Our panelists today are as follows. Dr. Joanne Kuchera-Morin from the University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB. Cletus James Dalglish-Schommer from Otis College of Art and Design. Liliana Conlisk Gallegos from California State University, San Bernardino. Yoon Chung Han from San Jose State University. I wanted to thank you, and now I want to go over to Erica. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. I'm representing LEAF, the Leonardo Education and Art Forum. My name is Erica Hruby. I'm the editorial director at Leonardo. Before we start, I need to thank Gustavo for all of the work he's done to bring us this panel today. So we are indebted to you, Gustavo, and we thank you. And before we open the floor to all of these wonderful panelists, we want to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Leonardo and the work that we do at the intersection of art, science, and technology. So who is Leonardo? Leonardo, we are the International Society of the Art, Sciences, and Technology. Our namesake is Leonardo da Vinci. We are an international network of people who work in the interdisciplinary spaces. So Leonardo exists to create a community for these practitioners and amplify their ideas and their work. The practice of artists and scientists working together is not new, but in the 20th century, this defined separate paths for the artist, the scientist, and the engineer due to much debate in the academies. And so while scholarly work became hyper-focused in one discipline or another, natural curiosity of the other that was practiced in these silos created a network that craved to be connected. So in 1968, our founder, who was rocket scientist and artist Frank Molina, set out to bridge this network together through the popular media of the time, which was the print journal. So in his work as a scientist and an engineer, Frank Molina had access to an abundance of scholarly periodicals, but there was no equivalent publication for artists. So he decided to start one, and his concept was simple, that it was going to be a publication by serious artists with subject integrity that is secured by the same type of peer review as articles that is common in scientific journals. So while we were founded over 50 years ago, today we are much more. We are the network known as the International Society for the Arts, Sciences, and Technology. We continue to provide the journal Leonardo, but we've expanded our publications and our programs to meet the needs of artists, scholars, and practitioners around the world. Our purpose is to drive innovation at the intersection of art, science, and technology for positive global transformation. We inspire learners and leaders to catalyze change through the powerful exchange of ideas and cultivation of compelling content, transdisciplinary research, and collaborative communities, because complex problems require creative, boundary-crossing solutions. So Leonardo supports these big ideas in a full cycle of supportive facilitation, skill sharing, symposia, exhibitions, publications, and residencies. Our print publications are in partnership with MIT Press. These include the Leonardo Journal and our popular book series. Our digital publications include the Leonardo Electronic Almanac, which is a web journal, the Leonardo Abstract Service, which is a peer-reviewed database of transdisciplinary graduate thesis abstracts, and the Leonardo reviews of books, exhibitions, videos, websites, and conferences like CAA. Our successful programs include our international speaker series, Laser Talks, which is now hosted in over 40 locales around the world and virtually. Our artist residencies include the Scientific Delirium Madness residency with the Gerasi Resident Artist Program, and also a residency at Nokia Bell Labs. And in our partnership with Arizona State University, we co-sponsored the ASU Leonardo Imagination Fellowship, and this has recently completed its prototype season. Another Leonardo program is LEAF, the Leonardo Education and Art Forum, the sponsor of this panel today. LEAF convenes in person or virtually as today, and at additional international conferences such as ISEA, Balance and Balance, A2RU, SIGGRAPH, and others. Members of LEAF interact online through our community forum. And what LEAF does is promote the advancement of artistic practice, academic scholarship, and practice-led research by providing practitioners, educators, and students a national and international forum for dialogue at the intersections of art, science, and technology. So I invite you to visit leonardo.info/LEAF to join the electronic forum and connect with like-minded colleagues around the globe. So today we know that documenting and capturing the creative innovators and provocateurs of culture is not enough. If media is the messenger, then Leonardo must expand our scope to represent the unique works and challenges we face in the 21st century. So through our partnership with ASU, we will harness the nexus of art, science, and technology to transform higher education and reimagine a new global university as a pillar of an emerging global future. As an enterprising think tank, ASU Leonardo integrates transdisciplinary inquiry and creative practice to solve compelling problems, explore timeless mysteries, and shape a finer future. So to that end, we are embarking on new paths in the education sphere, building on the LEAF program and our graduate abstracts database with EdTech micro modules, radical pedagogies, and innovative mentorship. To date, the Leonardo Journal has published articles by over 7,000 authors, but we realistically admit that the artists and authors are predominantly English speaking and from the Western Hemisphere. So in recognizing these biases, Leonardo has embarked on a multilingual publishing program that puts ideas first. We're beginning to publish in new modes, media, and languages, including upcoming art catalogs and experimental digital publications. We have published journal articles in Spanish and Chinese, and the February 2021 issue of Leonardo Journal is fully bilingual in both Russian and English. So we do not work alone. Our business model is partnership focused. We are a network of networks working with partners around the world at higher learning institutes, museums, research labs, and innovation departments of the world's most innovative companies. So let's collaborate. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joanne Kuchera-Morin, Director and Chief Scientist of the Allospher Research Facility, a 3-story immersive computation instrument and Professor of Media Arts and Technology and Music at the University of California, Santa Barbara. My research focuses on creative computational systems and multimodal media systems content and facilities design. Today, I will discuss a new and unique intersection of advanced science and art through the interactive visualization of complex systems using the creative process of music composition and performance. The following video is a demonstration of this process, showing the composition and performance of my newest immersive work entitled Myrioi, a visual and sonic demonstration of quantum mechanics. As I share the screen. Information intuitively. Sorry, guys. The nature and behavior of matter and energy on the atomic or subatomic level, quantum physics, lends to its ethereal nature, gossamer wings, those substances that are immutable, however untouchable. To touch the untouchable, to understand and know what is real but cannot be seen, and to experience it, to truly experience immateriality as substance, form, and shape that is dynamic, transformative, and truly alive, constantly changing, but continually unchanged. The vibration of waveforms intermingling as one form, one shape, one spirit, into a myriad of forms. This is Myrioi. This is the work we give to you. What would it be like if we could generate, control, and transform this complex information the way that a composer creates and transforms a work of art? If we could use our senses to perceive very complex n-dimensional information intuitively and as second nature? What if we could be immersed in this data and experience it as real-world phenomenon? Imagine a computational platform that is a natural extension of ourselves for processing this complex information, much in the same way composers compose and ensembles perform a piece of music in a concert hall. A truly immersive experience. Could one design a computational framework, vocabulary, and an instrument that could support this immersive, interactive creative process, allowing researchers in different fields to interactively visualize and sonify and perform their data as artists do? Confronted with these questions for the past 37 years, as a composer of complex mathematical systems and a distributed immersive computational platform designer, I and my research group have created a visual, sonic, interactive computational platform based on the artistic process of composition and performance, coupled with structural design using the best practices of scientific visualization and information visualization for the creation of unique immersive artworks based on the ground truth principles of science, as well as a tool for scientific discovery. Now, this is how Myrioi was created. I began my quantum studies in 2008 with physicist Professor Luca Politi and media arts researcher Lance Putnam from my Allospher research group. We presented our studies in composing elementary wave functions of a hydrogen-like atom and identified several relationships between physical phenomena and the musical composition that helped guide the process. The hydrogen-like atom, which Myrioi, the visual sonic composition, is based upon, accurately describes some of the fundamental quantum mechanical phenomena of nature and supplies the composer with a set of well-defined mathematical constraints that can create a wide variety of complex spatio-temporal patterns. We explore the visual sonic appearance of time-dependent combinations of 2 and 3 eigenfunctions of an electron with spin in a hydrogen-like atom, highlighting the resulting symmetries and symmetry changes. In this work, Myrioi, innumerable myriad particles, to share the experience of being immersed and interacting with myriads of particles that create currents becoming waveforms, to understand and really experience viscerally the quantum, sharing and interacting with this net. Myrioi will take these wave function combinations of the hydrogen-like atom to the highest level of content, myriads of particles forming waves of light, interactively and immersively visualized and experienced by a shared community who are present and active in a world that they could only experience in an instrument and an environment built solely for unencumbered group user experience in a virtual world. Now, I composed the piece, but that is just the beginning of an uncompleted work. My instrumental ensemble, the Allospher Research Group, with their expertise in disciplines that make the whole greater than the sum of the parts, brings the piece to life and completes the composing of the work. Let me now turn the presentation over to those of my expert ensemble who will explain their roles in this composition.
My name is Andres Cabrera, and I am the software systems lead at the Allospher Research Group. I have led the effort to develop the software infrastructure used to compose and generate Myrioi. Myrioi was written using Allolib, our open source C++ application framework that provides facilities for distributed, time-based, and interactive multimedia. It has been designed to simplify portability across the whole gamut of immersive display systems, and through Allolib, we are able to prototype on laptops and deploy to HMDs and distributed systems like the Allospher, or all at once with minimal code changes. This framework is currently being used in artistic and scientific applications through our involvement with the Media Arts and Technology program, the Department of Music, and our collaborations with materials researchers and the Center for Scientific Computing in the California Nanosystems Institute here at UCSB. Allolib provides support for OpenGL, audio, MIDI, and OSC, and builds on top of that a compositional framework that assists both in interactive prototyping and sketching during development of the system, as well as simple time-based sequencing to realize compositions. By centering on the design around the concept of distributed parameter, a network synchronized data container, we have created a set of preset management, sequencing, and interaction tools that can be controlled and generated from text files, GUI objects, network messages, and programmatic C++ code. The compositional requirements of Myrioi drove new development and enhancement of Allolib.
My name is Kon-Hyun Kim. I'm a student researcher in virtual reality that handles the rendering and physical installation of Myrioi and providing immersive visuals in any given environment. Using Allolib, we create our works to run on any platform and setup. This means that the same code and content could run on a laptop, be shown in a head-mounted display, or be shown in a projection system involving multiple machines and projectors. Myrioi, as a spatial and aural piece, was composed using our Allosphere, a full surround VR facility here in UCSB, utilizing its canvas of 4 pi steradian projection and surround audio. In order to provide viewers of SIGGRAPH with similar level of immersion, the physical installation was to be constructed using 6 stereo projectors and surround audio, filling up the view in order to show Myrioi in its entirety. The environment was set up in a way so that multiple viewers would collectively feel like they are present in the middle of the virtual space and experience Myrioi as it unfolds around them. At the same time, the content could be experienced via an HMD, allowing users to view and move around the virtual space. Now, with the visual set up, we started working on other aspects of the immersive experience using our collective expertise.
Hello, my name is Tim Wood. I'm a PhD student in the Media Arts and Technology program at UCSB and a member of the Allospher Research Group. My research focuses on full-body interaction in immersive systems. The quality of immersive experience depends greatly on our ability to engage and interact in a natural way. In our immersive installation environment, Muriel, we created a tracking system using multiple depth cameras to track user movement. User motion and location in the installation space affects how the piece unfolds, creating opportunities for additional quantum particles to emerge and dissipate in the composition, as well as subtle shifts of the virtual camera's navigation parameters. Dramatic gestures emerge differently than subtle stillness, and quantum particles are generated with varying quantum state parameters. Due to the nature of the current pandemic, our public installation space is not available for interactive engagement. In order to bring a small slice of the experience into your home, we also created a software application for experiencing Muriel on your own computer or VR headset. This application will be available to download on the Muriel website during the conference. Thank you.
My name is Gustavo Rincon. I'm a media artist educated as an architect. My role in Muriel is to bring the virtual into the material and the making of virtual atomic structures. My research is in AR, VR, XR, spaces as instruments. I experiment with fabrication models and processes to realize material form. My dissertation topic is titled New Media Architectures. My motivation is to shape spaces, interconnecting all domains, both natural and man-made, as information.
Hello, I'm Cletus Dalglish-Schommer, and I'm presenting today as part of an interdisciplinary panel taking place as part of the College Art Association conference in the midst of the COVID epidemic and delivered remotely, all of which seem relevant. This presentation emerges out of previous discussions that have focused on the challenges emerging within disciplinarity as part of the larger culture, as well as recognition of inequities in access and in the formation of the specialized discourses we are drawing upon. If we're going to take questions of access and equity seriously, we must not only ask about how our institutions give access to existing discourses, but also how discourse is generated, valued, and institutionalized. I'm hoping that by sharing some thoughts on what I see as a fundamental dilemma, even a contradiction emergent within the discourse of contemporary art, there may be a basis for a cross-disciplinary discussion of challenges faced more broadly, namely in the articulation of contemporary discourses, what is included, who is included, and why. I teach courses in modern and contemporary art history to practicing artists. The notion of teaching contemporary art history may itself embody a contradiction. Within the discipline of art history, a debate about how the history of artists who may not even be dead yet could differ from mere criticism or journalism has been very real. But if contemporary art shares some risky affinity with journalism, one experience I had pointed out that maybe the journalists themselves didn't get the memo. I was at a dinner for the Reporters Commission for Free Speech when I found myself sitting at a table with some journalists that I recognized either from television or radio. Not being a journalist myself, I offered an introduction, pointing out that I was studying conceptual art. I was surprised when one of the journalists who I recognized very much and remembered for his grandfatherly presentations on television turned to me and very squarely said, "What the F is conceptual art?" I was taken a little bit aback, but thinking on my feet, thought I came with a reasonable answer for a general audience there at the table. And I pointed out that if he was familiar with Jackson Pollock and his drip paintings, that as Pollock's importance emerged, there was discussion about what made the work important. Was it the abstraction? Was it the gesture, the performance? Or was it in fact the idea of the work, the idea that generated the work that was important? And conceptual art in some ways could be seen as emerging from that line of thinking, that it was the idea that mattered. I was a little bit surprised then when an NPR reporter beside me turned and very straight-faced said, "And why should we care?" I didn't really have an answer at the time, but I think in some ways in an interdisciplinary context, that's what we are here to discuss. Why should we care? What contribution could a discussion of art within and in relation to technology and science, and in the context of our larger culture, contribute to why we should care about these questions? My thinking is that by sharing a story and some questions that I have about the present arrival or conception formation of what is no doubt a very specific idea of contemporary art, but which in its own way can't be taken to be familiar or even generally accepted, I wanted to approach it as a way of pointing out what I think makes this question within contemporary art perhaps a starting point for a discussion more broadly about how we are seeing collaboration and certain questions that perhaps we've become more familiar with in terms of how we use disciplinarity, but also create dialogue. One way of looking at modern art is to look back to, say, Baudelaire's writing on The Painter of Modern Life, describing how the modern artist, from his perspective, was a person of the world, a person who was moving in the world, responding to the world in the contemporary society. In this way, that figure, the painter of modern life that Baudelaire described, was a generalist, someone who was not confined to the studio, but was in fact engaging with the life of the city and the town. That's different from the concept presented to us by Clement Greenberg almost 100 years later, wherein the concept of the modern artist and the development of modern art very much becomes a form of specialization, a realization perhaps by the painter that the essence of painting is something that is very distinct, not general, and something that should focus on what only painting could do, namely the presentation of color and flatness and exploration of how that could be developed to its greatest degree. In a certain way, this concept of painting as specialization perhaps even has a certain post-war industrial flavor to it, the idea of specializing one's product, one's area of discipline. In many ways, contemporary art, or at least the story I would like to explore, comes in a very real reaction to this Greenbergian idea of the specialization of a medium to its own essential qualities, that sculpture should do only what sculpture can do, painting should do only what painting could do. Minimalism, conceptualism, pop, and the emergence of happenings or performance each have an explicit start in different aspects of a rejection of what had been a prominent Greenbergian argument for modernism. So in my mind, contemporary art is very much emerging from a response to an idea of modern art, or a modern art as articulated by Greenberg in a way that in some ways supported a very New York focused idea. Donald Judd, in his essay on specific objects, very much directly is responding to Greenberg, arguing against a kind of medium specificity, saying that half or more of the best new work is neither painting or sculpture. Alan Capro's development of the concept of happenings was very much a response to this Greenbergian idea of abstraction and definition of art. Joseph Kosuth, in making his case for conceptual art, very much, again, in some ways was challenging Greenberg by saying the idea of the medium is not specialized enough, that in fact it should be the idea of art and the idea alone that should be the specialization of artists. Now, in making this case, one of the things that Kosuth did was to draw on an idea of logic and philosophy to emphasize that an analytic, self-referential art, an art based on tautology, where the art referred only to itself, should be its aim. This in turn was countered. Artists such as Mary Kelly, and as discussed in work by Nitzan Shaked and Julie Carson, about how the counterpoint of the synthetic proposition, the idea of something that refers outside of itself, was in fact where art could explore. In fact, Kasu's own work may in some ways be an excellent demonstration of how a work can never refer only to itself, but very much refers to the society around it. Now, that notion of expanding, that the work always refers outside of itself, can also be seen in the discussion of site specificity. Specifically, I'm thinking about the work of Mi-Wan Kwan, who points out that over a period of time, the notion of site expanded and expanded to the point that discourse itself could be seen as a site. The discourse of art, the discourse of contemporary art, could be taken as a site. I point to these things because they point to an expansion of the concept, an expansion of the frame, you might say, throughout a history of contemporary art. And yet, this notion of the site of discourse is itself now what I think is one of the questions we have to face. Because whereas a presentation like this within the context of a conference, even an interdisciplinary panel, is not the same as the understanding that we have today of what is the context of discourse in a world of so much media that is well outside of these specialized environments. How can we point to discourse aside from pointing to the culture as a whole? And I think that's one of the challenges that we face. And I think that the starting point I would take from an art framework to explore this is to look to the work of John Cage and Richard Hamilton. Because on some level, it's Cage's refusal of the creation of an object, from a musical standpoint, but also very influential on art, the refusal that the work is itself the focus instead of the expansion of experience that I think points the way for us today. Because I see in Cage's argument an argument for something that perhaps could be a foundation for us as an interdisciplinary discussion. And that is that the generation or the sharing of the concept that the artist is one who develops the means to demonstrate that wonder remains an option in the face of experience. That notion of wonder, as simple as it may seem, I think is something that across disciplines is a challenge to make accessible. To make accessible the tools to encounter the wonder that is at part of the fundamental initiation of the discipline. I think that part of this also points to the fact that in an environment where individual disciplinary expertise is emphasized, we're also brought to the point that some of these questions, the questions of where we begin to ask the questions of what is shared and how we can take the experience of something that, on the one hand, could seem extraordinary and not convey it in such a way that it makes those less familiar feel that there's some kind of inadequacy. Instead, I think we need to begin, and I think this will require new platforms and new modes of finding ways to start that will require collaboration, not only across disciplines and across media, but across communities. Thank you.
Hello, thank you to the organizers. My name is Liliana Gallegos, and I'm an associate professor of communication studies at Cal State San Bernardino. I come to you today as a Chicana, Indigenous, Mestiza, Transborder Nepantlera activista, for which I will use the acronym SIMNA from now on. SIMNA, and I refrain from using terms such as labels such as Latina or Hispanic, because these terms are misnomers that enable and reproduce oversimplified perceptions of a very diverse population with very different and unique experiences and points of view. And Chicano identity particularly refers to a consciousness of resistance informed by decolonial knowledge of the history of colonization and our legacy in the indigenous peoples of America. The title of my presentation is Decolonization Through the Expansion of Borders, a Chicana, Indigenous, Mestiza, Transborder, Nepantlera activista's consciousness of resistance, provides a vision toward a new media architecture uniting the arts, sciences, and culture. Current plans for a diverse, equitable, and inclusive future are appropriative when they disregard the contributions of marginalized border people. Hereafter, I will use the acronym MVP, and diverse frames and perspective of which my Chicana, Indigenous, Mestiza, Transborder, Nepantlera activista, SIMNA Conocimiento en Conciencia is one example. These plans are imagined as the culmination of a homogeneous universal process towards the future, referred to as innovative or liberal. The overt binary and hierarchical discourse presented by the current presidency and the extended conditions of the COVID-19 epidemic is dismantling the institutionalized and quotidian Eurocentrism and supremacy of such perspectives. A larger populace is questioning the goals of modernity whose antecedent is coloniality. Not everyone is experiencing the effects of the pandemic in the same way. Some are experiencing harsher instability and death. More people than ever are being pushed to enter border or liminal Nepantla-like states. For Chicana theorist Gloria Anzaldúa, Nepantla is a border place where multiple forms of reality are experienced simultaneously in perpetual tension and conflict. It is also a time where individuals experience loss of control, suffer anxiety, and confusion. Thoughts and beliefs are questioned. The colonial Eurocentric idea of empire building envisioned as the expansion of homogeneous nations and identities bordered from dichotomous others as the future. Yet the future is an expansion of borders themselves, that liminal space in between, which exposes its inhabitants to visualize the failure of hierarchization, dichotomies, generalizations, where resistance proposes remixes, heterogeneity, pluriverse, and the past as a window to the future. Being undocumented is one of the many life experiences suffered by MVP who have endured and survived over about 500 years of continuous pandemic-like conditions, literal and metaphoric, abused by institutions with unfair wages, working in inhumane conditions, separated and unable to be with their families, incarcerated, murdered, with no representation and limited access to resources and opportunities. Out of this perpetual existence in Nepantla, Anzaldúa explains that some acquire the identity of Nepantleros, or quote, boundary crossers, thresholders, who initiate others in rites of passage, activistas, who from listening, receptive, a spiritual stance, rise to their own visions and shift into acting them out, haciendo mundo nuevo, making a new world, one that acknowledges the humanity of the other. With being Simna comes a deep consciousness and a sense of self that does not rest on external forms of identification that come with attachments to power, privilege, and control. Instead, as a Simna, I constantly shift to uphold publicly intimate ways of identifying which relate to sharing, upcycling, repurposing, a culture of exchange with a sense of community, with the consciousness that there are other identities and experiences out there similar. My consciousness of belonging to the invisible community of those who strive for truth, beauty, and justice has preserved me from feeling isolated. Those are Einstein's words, and they resonate with the Simta cosmovision as it is fueled by a need for survival, activism, and a sense of connection with marginalized communities out there from past, present, and future. Though apparently parallel, transgenerational decolonial goals have different genealogies that the innovative, which thrives for inclusion, experiential knowledge production, experimental open source publication models to make information more accessible and foster a decentralized vision for media, arts, and sciences and technology. These goals seem universally new as a result of a Eurocentric and privileged perspective of the future, from having continuous access to digital technological platforms, the same which expose individuals to ideologies of modernity and their effects, and which have functioned like massive objects that cause distortion, coloniality, hierarchy, binary thinking in space-time. They appear new due to the gaps in the mainstream superficial understanding of the general relativity of identity-based human experience. And this general relativity is evidenced in the effects of our colonial past, as explained through Quijano's concept of coloniality, which is an ongoing invisible spawn of dichotomous hierarchy embedded within the matrix of power, old for us, new for others, which are in the digital live streaming of the murders, violence, and physical abuse inflicted on African-American, Black, Latino, and Indigenous people at the hands of police, immigration officers, and random white supremacists of all races across the country. Digital technology exposes oblivious individuals to some of the many consequences of coloniality's reckless dichotomization and hierarchization of identity markers, such as race. The ideology that markers of racial identity and culture serve as signs or for categorizing, such as within first, second, and third world in an imagined competition toward imposed and universalized Eurocentric modernity goals, begets those false dichotomies through the imposition of multidimensional man-made ideological borders systematically taught as organic binaries, such as the ones between MVP, arts and culture, and science and technology. Within this fabricated dichotomy, assimilation into the Anglo-Western European culture and dismissal then of MVP cultures has been a prerequisite for reaching an imposed version of success. Through a deficit paradigm, cultural rejection and resistance to the supremacist exclusionary function of coloniality and modernity is interpreted as inability, lack of effort, and a personal failure that needs to be fixed. Higher education upholds flawed concepts such as framing that not enough women and people of color want to study STEM when it is in organizations. This is on the organizations and institutions. This way of presenting STEM runs parallel with the colonial purposes of upholding supremacy by reducing or ignoring MVP perspectives. And this will not be resolved by only adding art to create STEAM. We must revamp our understanding of what science and technology are and how they are related to our colonial past and the ongoing intergenerational resistance to coloniality. The Western Eurocentric hack on science and technology justified white supremacy with the fabrication of the 5 races of man through pseudoscientific practices like phrenology, criminal anthropology, eugenics, and the farce of social Darwinism. Technology was also used to drive slavery and genocide and the obliteration of MVP, particularly in the Americas in the early 20th century. Under the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz in Mexico, the indigenous Mayo and Yaqui were massacred to build railroads for industrialization and the expansion of imperialistic goals. Through the myth of modernity, the suffering of the conquered and colonized people appears as a necessary sacrifice and the inevitable price of modernization. Enrique Dusa in 1992. The myth of modernity made indigenous perspectives seem part of a failed past due to systematic impositions like the Mexican caste system. Those at the top, who were called Christians, was code for white, had financial opportunities, access to education, and paid less taxes. Christians would be asked to be godparents to convince the church that a child was of a higher caste, as assignations were made in baptismal records. So people were forced to deny who they were for a dignified way of life. Within a single individual, there could be multiple generations of resistance, coerced assimilation, or a negotiation of the two against a homogenizing universalist perspective. Latino and Hispanic are imposed and misunderstood labels. We are not all the same race. And this resistance, assimilation, and transborder thinking across those divides is multidimensional. In the myth of modernity, the ideas of what science and technology are and can be are narrowed through a matrix of power instituted in coloniality, which branches out into other imposed ideals for beauty, good, truth, and specific to us, also those imaginary borders around what scholarly research and pedagogy can be. The expansion of border thinking is a major push toward the project of transmodernity, a design for multiple and diverse futures where marginalized sensibilities parallel to those belonging to MVP become then centralized. MVP sensibilities and ingenuity can include repurposing butter containers to hold beans, up to providing the logic and vision necessary for the architectural project of transmodernity. Such a project requires an expansion in mainstream societal knowledge and understanding, conocimiento, which enhances the development of a proactive consciousness, conciencia, of the serious connections between dehumanization, injustice, environmentalism, sustainability, and liberation. The technological plans and diagrams for such an architecture of liberation are hidden in plain sight in public spaces around the world, which I refer to as intensified Chicano Latino art transborderscapes, or Ixtlat. And I offer a theorization and reading of one of the largest and significant Ixtlat, Barrio Logan's Chicano People's Park in San Diego, to introduce the theoretical foundations of a new media architecture that seeks to unite arts, technology, culture, and also data analytics for the purposes of designing a conceptual framework to create a prototype tool for the exposure of art and culture from the perspective of marginalized, minoritized, and underserved communities that have been here since the beginning of the history of this nation and in the world, right? So in this way, we can counteract appropriation by expanding the transborder experience and vision further with accessible spaces for learning. Chicano People's Park is owed to the protests and demands of Chicanos for the permanence of Chicano presence. It is a pantheon to Chicano history and perspectives, a dissonant, harmonious visual chorus telling the histories of lucha, struggle, loss, victories, and the in-betweens, where one is not simply oppressed or victimized, nor is one only oppressor or victimizer. Rather, one negotiates within the imaginary to a decolonizing otherness where all identities are at work in one way or another. Emma Perez, 1999. These symbols encapsulate projections to the transmodern future, embodied performances and expressions of border intergenerational trauma and pain in Nepantlera. This interpretation of pain is related to birth giving as a metaphor for cultural, activist, and artistic upcycling production in relation to space, time, a perpetual and always different delivery of the diverse versions of Chicano experience. It materializes in the bifurcating freeways that emulate Tlazolteotl's gigantic legs, opened with murals emanating from the in-between, like kaleidoscopic fountain springs of all life forms which escape possession and are eternally communal. Conocimiento and conciencia literally uphold bridges that shelter Chicano Park's embodiment of borderscape. Artists Guillermo Gómez Peña and Roberto Cifuentes describe borderscape as a place of difference thriving within neoliberalist organizations, a cultural flow resulting from the process of globalization, and all-around possession or haunting made possible by the perpetuity of movement, Kuhn 2000. According to Apadurai, the suffix scape allows us to point to the fluid, irregular shapes of these landscapes, deeply respectable constructs inflected by the historical, linguistic, and political situations of different sorts of actors. Kuhn defines borderscapes as a web of images and ideas and proposes to focus on borderscapes that are not landscapes because enough has been said about landscape as exemplification of the borderscape. But I propose adding the prefix trans to conceptualize the use of technology and the digital to return to the landscape, but across dimensions of extended reality to focus on images and ideas. With digital media and technology, we can sensorially emulate and demonstrate the scientific expressions and technology of our conocimiento and conciencia embedded within the architecture of Ixtlats. The divergent, varied expressions of experience deliver the decolonial imaginary, which enables an experience of conscientization to current coloniality. Increasing accessibility and congregation in divergent spaces of the decolonial imaginary across space and time will further intensify the liberating effect as the decolonial imaginary can help us rethink history in a way that makes Chicano agency transformative. Perez, 1999. Introducing Ixtlats to the technological and digital realm will educate on the decolonial imaginary by making it accessible and visible to the untrained in history, pedagogies, and epistemologies of liberation and resistance. The introduction of Ixtlats into a digital hub of extended reality will make it possible to create international archives and databases, linking symbols, themes, and histories to educate on the deep value and importance of Chicano and Latino art. My goal is to design and bring to life the portals that I see at the park itself, linking them to Ixtlats located around the globe, demonstrating virtually how they're connected across space and time, making my Simpna perspective the driving force to design and produce such an experience available and accessible to the world at any moment in time via the internet. As heightened, erotic, mystical, and political communal physical borderscapes, Ixtlats are an antidote or Mestiza, a Chicano jouissance in resistance to what William Naricio refers to as digital crack, or the seductive hallucinations of the Mexican in America, which are composed of massively produced and broadcasted misrepresentations of Mexican, Chicano, Latino identity across media platforms. The Mestiza found in Ixtlats utilizes a precursory public technology founded in interactivity and the immersive qualities of life experience available and accessible to all. Ixtlats function as portals into the essence of coexisting, underrepresented, pluralistic, alternative orders of things. They portray the way the process of resistance through conocimiento and concientización actually looks like. They are the materialization of the embrace of our ancestral understanding of our fragmentary interconnectedness, which emanates from the growing heart of Nepantlera transborder identity. It is urgent to immortalize and share the impact of Ixtlats with the world, not only because these zones are physical and ideological context zones, but because they are places defined by parts of a cultural knowledge not sought out nor understood by the dominant identity and its ideological stance. They are open temples to resistance dedicated to our overt and loud defiant ways that yet continue to appear covert. Yes, even including to some Chicanos and Latinos who were denied their own history, which is an effect of the same oppression, which has more and more people joining us in Nepantlera today. Transborder escapes will aid humanity in the decolonial process embracing of Nepantlera, or the cracks from which blades of grass grow, the organic life and order that man failed to modify and crush. The whole and fragmentary nature of Chicano Park reminds us that man-made borders are not permanent, but malleable, disruptible, and that BIPOC, MVP, SIPNA experiences are diverse and infinite, even if apparently contradictory. The harmonious unison of all factors of transborderscapes are in the service of resistance, the recovery of history, pride, and thus such a multifaceted project of digitizing Chicano Park and Ixtlats like it will make visible the portals within their complexity and their true liberating power. Ancestors and descendants dialoguing conocimiento and conciencia lovingly, simultaneously across space and time. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Yoon Chung Han. I'm assistant professor in the design department at San Jose State University. And then today I'm going to talk about my work, The Rose on Your Veins, revealing hidden narratives in human veins and visualizing the data. So I've been researching and then creating interactive biometric data artwork over the past 8 years. So what is a biometric data? So every biology organism has a unique body pattern such as fingerprints, iris, palm prints, and faces. So these special biometric patterns on the body represent the person's unique signature and identity. They're intuitive and powerful resources that represent the individual's genetic identity. In this digital era, the main problems with the use of biometric data are the misuse of personal data and privacy issues, since the data contains information acquired from individuals. Sometimes biometric data can be stolen for other purposes or crimes, which is a source of great concern in society. Although people are afraid of having their biometric data stolen, the use of biometric data is becoming more commonplace in this era due to the ease and the convenience. As more digital applications request people to input their biometric data, the possibility of losing their personal data and identities may increase. The issues can lead to the question what the notion of real identity means and what method can be used to define identity and the hidden narratives in the biometric data. The issues about the biometric data and the identity and the uniqueness of the biometric data have become my main inspiration and then great concern addressed in my artwork. So I researched it and used 3 different biometric data over the past 8 years, which were the fingerprints, iris, and then veins. So as true for many types of biometric data, fingerprints, iris, and then veins contains aesthetically beautiful images, as you can see here. And then they have very beautifully integrated lines and colors that are naturally generated when we are born. And with those 3 different data, I created 3 different biometric data artworks that point out different aspects of those data. It's called the disc eyes, and then rows of the veins. So these are the images of the 3 different biometric data artwork I created. And here are the installation views. So, we have a limited time today, so I cannot explain too much details. So I'll introduce and focus on more on the latest work I created, which is the rows of the veins. And actually, so formerly previous name is a rows of veins, but I changed it, the name to rows in you. So rows in you, so what's the story behind of this work? So as you know, every person has all different, biometric data, especially veins are also very different, veins are under our skin, and the vein data contains uniquely complicated lines that resemble the roads and paths surrounding us, which is really amazing. All the forms of the human veins are nearly impossible to change, like the biometric feature. The rules constantly change it by human impact, nature, and/or climate changes, but veins stay the same as always. So what we can actually learn when we compare those 2 data? I believe meaningful and creative approaches can be explored to find a new correlation between the beautifully integrated human vein lines and the object of the similar form in the real world, which would be roads or streets in the world. So I started comparing those 2 different data and then try to find what would be the similarities and the differences. The rows of your vein, the rows in you, the new title of the work, is a project of a series of my interactive biometric data artworks that allows participants to scan their veins and to find the rows that match their veins in the world. The rows resemble how our vein lines are interconnected and how the blood circulated in our bodies in various directions at various speeds and different conditions. This new artwork explores the line segmentation and the structure of veins and compares them to beautifully intertwined rows in the real world. The participants can also export the data and keep them as a 3D printed sculptures as part of the artistic experience. Through this project, users can explore the correlation between the individuals and the environments using the hidden patterns under skin and the vein recognition techniques, image processing, and the artificial intelligence technology. So this project also has a potential to lead the way in the interpretation of complicated data sets while providing aesthetically beautiful and mesmerizing visualizations. So here's the video documentation of the work. Oh, sorry. One more time. So I'll explain how it actually is made it and then some details about the work. So Rosin, you use various techniques of image processing computer vision with the OpenCV library in Python. So this image on the left shows the whole process of image extraction of veins and the matching process. And then the image on the right side shows the process of extraction and analyze the data of the veins. So the system first scans the vein image and then try to find the, that is the image is actually captured through the infrared camera, and then it detects a clear lines using line segmentation and canny edge detection and other the image process techniques. And then once clear lines are extracted, then begins the process of template matching, and which matches the scanned vein image as a template to the entire live geomap data and defines roads. They can capture veins in any part of their bodies by using the customized infrared camera. So for the better and also easier result, veins on the wrist have been recommended since it's clear, unique, and easily achieved. So users can also choose a location where they want to search their roads, such as cities or countries or regions in the world. Or otherwise, the road data range is open to anywhere on the earth, and then the best matching roads are highlighted and visualized. And this work actually has some evolution. So this was the first version I made it. It was a 2D map visualization, but now updated version is a 3D map visualization like this. So users can see two colored lines in the interface, map interface. So the green lines represent their vein lines, their original vein lines, and then the red lines represent the matched roads in existing cities or regions. So green lines above the red lines support an understanding of the relationship between those two data. And then there's a looped animation on the roads, mimic the blood circulations in the veins and liveness in the urban areas. So users can drag to see the map from different angles or zoom in and out and to see the roads further or closer. The capture original vein image and then extracted skeletonized lines appear at the left bottom corner of the interface so that they can compare the original images and then match it roads. And the address of the selected location appears at the center of the screen so they can recognize where it is. And the users can click the try again button to restart or click archive so they can save their data and share with other people. So here are some research. So due to the pandemic, actually, I created this work in last year, but I couldn't have a chance to show this one in the professional, like in the gallery setup. But I had actually a chance to show this one in casually in Seoul, South Korea in August 2020. And then about 15 to 20 participants actually try it and then scan their veins and then find the, match the roads. And then they had a playful experiences with all other resorts. So the resorts, as you can see, actually showed in different locations, like the roads in Amsterdam or Sydney, Tokyo, or Seoul. Overall, the veins are very organic lines, but the roads are pretty very complicated lines. So it was almost impossible to find 100% matched roads, but the matching percentage was more than 90% accuracy. So almost it was matched. And then the short and disconnected vein lines showed the lower accuracy on the matching result. However, overall, the participants were able to understand the relationship between those two data and then, satisfied and had a really playful experience with it. And then this is the overall floor plan of this work. And then, as I said, I couldn't have a chance to show this one in the full gallery setup yet, but I'm expecting to show this one in Austria in February as a part of the TEI conference. So hopefully it's not canceled and then happened so that the people can actually experience this work. So the installation actually consists of several parts. So there's interactive parts that they can scan and then explore the matching process. And there's also 3D printed sculptures so that they can observe how it works and then how other people's veins actually match to the roads. And the personalized experience is very important aspect in my work. So, and then very significant aspect of this artwork too. So as participants input their vein data as art materials, it becomes a part of the installation, and then it's a final part of the final outcome and the part of the experience too. So 3D printed sculptures are good ways to document the final result. Furthermore, it actually shows the match result with the detailed information about the location and road data. And then 3D sculptures were arranged on top of the map print to show the road data and the vein data simultaneously, as shown in these images. And there are two color choices, red and black. So here's the one of the examples matching the India, Delhi. And this is an roads matched to the veins in South Korea. So in the future exhibitions, participants can request printing their vein data and the matching roads, and then I'll print the outcome in the live gallery setup. So this artwork, the vein data becomes a fascinating art form that reveals beautifully integrated roads and paths underneath the skin that are invisible to the naked eye, but we can see it with our eyes. And the roads or paths are recreated, added on top of the cities, regions, and the areas surrounding us. This work aims to propose a new way of visualizing the correlation between individuals and environments using vein recognition techniques and image processing. This project also has the potential to lead the way in the interpretation of complicated data sets while providing aesthetically beautiful and mesmerizing visualization. The human body's connection to the real world can lead to new opportunities to create their own geological signature. And furthermore, this work could address environmental issues and question the difference between naturally generated data in human bodies and artificially created data in our world. This work allows us to rethink and reshape the point of how nature and our environments resemble our bodies and what we can discover by technology. This project addressed important environmental issues by creating data-driven novel interface design as an interdisciplinary arts engineering project. Global warming and climate changes have impacted our environments. The enchantment of discovery in this work is the value of this work, and the participant can take journeys from their bodies to the world with help of big data, data mining, and image process techniques. Also, this work is a contactless interaction. So veins can be detected with the infrared camera. So it can be possible to suggest a new contactless and safe input system for a personalized art experience. Through this contactless interaction is more convenient and hygiene, especially in this pandemic, which leads to high safety and the user satisfaction for the interactive experiences. And then as a future work, I'm planning to have a more enhanced quality on the matching result. And then I'm trying to show more like alternative locations and choices for the users. And then more personal aspects in the 3D printed sculptures will be coming. So different colors and different size and variations will be possible. And of course, the sonification. So I'm curious how the sound will sound like, you know, from the rows and the veins. So that's it. Thank you so much.
So thank you, all the speakers. Can you please turn on your cameras and microphones, and we will start our dialogue and discussion. So anyway, I wanted to start with saying thank you all. And there was a very diverse topics from, I would say, from this investigation of systems, from the quantum level to looking at border understandings and art and science and kind of redefining those architectures, to looking at the arts and conceptual art and the foundations of the A and STEAM, but also just where we are creatively. And then Yoon, I thought it was beautiful, this understanding of how we can use biometric data to look at kind of this data mapping, or I would say these geographies of the mind, and really just coming to terms with what's out there. So before we continue, are there any pressing questions from any of the panelists that they want to say to each other, or how do we want to proceed?
I just wanted to thank everybody for their presentations. And I think it's very interesting that we've got 4 panelists, 2 who really spoke to what we're talking about with interdisciplinarity and bringing down the borders of diversity across different cultures, and 2 of us that gave examples of how we use our arts and our science and our technology in order to bring it out to the public in new and different ways. So I think we have an exciting group that can sit down and talk about what we mean about this new educational transformation, this new way to look at society, which gets us out of the silos that we have been put in for many, many years in order to really make a new change that we need to have in order to be able to survive as a human race. So anyway, I thank my members on this panel, and I look forward to a very exciting discussion with all of you.
I also want to thank everyone as well. And everything that was said in the panel resonated. I have notes on everything. I think, JoAnn, what you were saying about the invisible and experience, you know, I'm definitely interested in that. I have a paper about that in terms of experiencing in Chicano Park. And so I was just like, I don't know, I was very interested in that kind of work. Like, how do you visualize or quantify what you're feeling or experiencing in a place like Chicano Park, right? So I philosophize, I theorize, I throw in some spoken word here and there, you know. But then you bring in like the actual, like the numbers, and you do the coding and stuff. So it'd be kind of cool to see like what could come from something where we collaborate, you know, collaborate more amongst this group, you know.
And that's what's really exciting about it, to understand that, you know, someone like me, who's a composer who has no scientific background whatsoever, can actually engage and understand things at a very complex level, because it's intuitive to all of us. And that's what's important. And that's one of the things that we've missed, I think, as Cletus pointed out in his conversations about how things have become so siloed, because we think that our disciplines only require the experts. And that's really not the case. And once we can get to the point of having a language where we can talk with one another, where I can talk about the quantum in this idea of scientific understanding of the invisible, but it also deals with spirituality, right? And that's really what you're talking about when you're in Chicano Park. So Cletus and Yoon, and thinking of what you said, Cletus, has been exciting, and Yoon, in thinking about trying to match your veins to all these different places, and how you would want to go to Amsterdam and Tokyo and all these places just to see where your veins reside, is to me just a really exciting idea of really pulling the world together. And it's not a big place anymore. We're all one community. So I'm going to open it up to the rest of you guys to give me your thoughts, and we'll go forward.
One of the things that stands out to me, both in Erica's introduction to what Leonardo is trying to do, and across the presentations you all made, is we are confronted today with, on the one hand, an opportunity to recognize just how complex our systems are, our globe is, our relations. Every once in a while, when I just want to kind of, you know, melt my mind, I try to imagine, you know, how many messages passed between London and New York in, say, 1750, and if anyone could even count or quantify how many individual messages or pieces of information are passed today, just to recognize how, on many levels that are not visible to us, we are dealing with the complexity that, on the one hand, we're challenged not to be overwhelmed by, but also has the potential, especially when you start exploring modes of visualization that also connect to just how complex we are as sensible and sentient beings, that we can relate to a very complex environment, because, you know, just stepping out on a windy day is a complex environment. But in certain ways, the way we share information or develop siloed languages, it often comes that the complexity or the alienation presents its face from any body of knowledge to the world. So perhaps people who are very familiar with it feel like, oh, we're just talking in a shared language. And yet, I think part of what we're dealing with in terms of being communicating in a more profound way, the way we have to, it's going to require a different kind of thinking and a different kind of way of finding either shared languages or points of reference.
And I want to speak to that because I'll tell you my own experience. Like I've had to learn the lingo of like, the decolonial critical race studies, Chicano studies, because that's how you get validated by academic circles. And so then what ends up happening is that we speak in those languages as well because time, we are always rushed into like 15-minute, like right now, 15-minute conversations of things that have been going on for 500 years and more, right? Like, how are we going to resolve things? Like, to 50 minutes, go, And so like this is we're becoming more pushed into creating this kind of discourse, right? Where we're using very particular language that, like you said, alienates people who don't understand like the words or but I think that's why we have also access to different forms of media presentation. So like we have this oral, right? We may hopefully have some slides that we could share through PDF. We could have a glossary of, visuals, but I think we need time to be able to express and unpack each one of these things that we've said today. I think that applies to like all of us really, So I think those are the things though, that we become so productive, that this is the language that we must acquire to be productive, so to save time. At the same time though, it's exclusionary. So I understand what you're saying completely.
Well,
oh no, sorry, I wanted to jump in real quickly. It's with the idea of time and in and out of time, and I guess music composition was also brought up. Yoon, can you speak to a little bit about your 8 years of biometric data and how you're trying to put it in and out of time and in and out of geographies, and also you're accessing databases too. Can you talk about why that's important?
I was going to say how, you from another culture and
Yep.
where you are now. And just to see the interesting transformations. And, I've known you for many years, and to see you still with that content, starting with the fingerprints and looking at these lines of the body and now seeing how they map into the lines of the world. It's just really exciting to me. So anyway, yes, would love to hear all that stuff.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so inspiring. Everyone's presentations was so mesmerizing, inspiring. And then the biometric data, I think it was just naturally came to me. I think I'm immigrant in the United States, and then I always kind of question about the identity issue or whatever. Always I encounter many things, situations related to identity, and there was a pretty much kind of question always I have, and then curious, whenever you go airport, I travel a lot, and then whenever you pass the airport, you have to kind of put the fingerprint and thumbprint and then pass the security. And then there was one small like starting point, and then I start learning and then researching, and then I learned a lot actually. And also there are a lot of actually issues going on, and like minorities or diversity, there are a lot of actually race issues too. So so I think learning and not only just the thing Cletus mentioned about the complexity. There's it's really actually tiny thing, but there's a really huge complexity in this in almost invisible data set. I was so mesmerized by the fact about the complexity too. So, and I'm kind of always curious about, what is a new thing we can find with when you actually correlate with this data to other data. So one thing for this work, actually, as a California, there's a lot of actually issue in climate change, or the wildfire, or air quality issues. So there are a lot of issues going on. And then I was curious also, a lot of things are happening in our cities or regions. So, and then I was curious. So we have our own data in our body, and there's also a data outside our body. So how can we actually make some connection between those things? So that was another one motivation for me to for this work. So I think it's also data is interesting. As you know, everyone is kind of working with the data. I think the complexity and then subjectivity, those two things are interesting parts in the data. So in this, my work is, there's a micro and macro aspect, it's really, it looks like really like a minor thing, but when you actually get closer, there's a huge thing going on. So I think how we perceive that the data and then the level and scope is also another interesting part. And also it's kind of interdisciplinary, also beyond the kind of borders and then boundaries between the different fields. So I think everyone is really connected. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because, even though we're different, there are different cultures, we all have veins and we all have things that are the same in all of our bodies. And I think that's a really exciting thing. And I just wanted to thank all of you, and especially Erica and Gustavo, for putting this panel together, because it was really exciting and fun, and something I think is just very important. I mean, as we were talking, I was getting emails from my department chair talking about the institution and how do we number our graduate students, and thinking, because this is coming from the higher administration, just thinking about how we really do have to make this change. Things aren't going to stay the same as they are, and we can't stay within the discipline like we have for all of these years. It's just too difficult. So anyway, again, thank you. Thank all of you, the panelists, all of you, and Erica and Gustavo for putting this together. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a few words. I wanted to say thank you very much for everyone here. My co-moderator, Erica, she's amazing. I'm inspired by all of you, but one thing that really caught my ear was the idea of complexity in systems, information, universals, and language. And I think those are really fundamental to the evolution of human society and us as a species. And I think maybe the question that I struggle with is our survival our survival in this world that is not balanced. So I just hopefully want to continue the dialogue in the future. And I guess for any last words, Erica, do you want to say something?
I'm just really excited to have the opportunity to have this discussion with you all and with the larger audience at CAA when we have our Q&A. Really what excites me is these discussions that we have amongst one another, and finding these commonalities and finding the humanity in the work and between each other. And I think that we've all really exemplified that today. So thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you very much all. And without further ado, I wanted to thank the CAA, Leonardo, Leaf, Dr. Kuchera-Morin, Dr. Jun Han, Dr. Liliana Gallegos, and Professor Cletus Dalglish-Schommer. And thank you all. And that's it. That's a wrap. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.